The hushed elegance of the Zenith, London's most exclusive rooftop bar, was shattered by a soft yet audacious whisper. "Excuse me, ma'am, but my father has a watch just like that one," said the 28-year-old black waitress, subtly gesturing to the billionaire's wrist. Silence descended like a physical weight. Ophelia Beaumont, a 65-year-old white tech titan with a fortune estimated at £4 billion, felt a chill creep down her spine as she looked at the young woman who had just served her a 1,500-pound bottle of vintage champagne. The timepiece, an antique Patek Philippe with a unique emerald-encrusted bezel, was one of a kind. Only two existed in the entire world, commissioned in 1952. Hey there. If you've ever been underestimated or pushed to the edge, this story is for you. Sky Harding's journey from a quiet waitress to a force of justice will leave you speechless. Her courage and determination expose the truth, and you won't want to miss it. Hit like if you believe in standing up for what's right, and make sure to subscribe for more stories that prove one person can make all the difference. Now, let's find out what exactly happened. "That's impossible," Ophelia muttered, her voice tighter than she would have liked. The waitress, whose name tag read Sky, maintained a composed smile, but her eyes held an unsettling calm, a disturbing depth that hinted at truths too profound to remain hidden. Sky Harding had worked at the Zenith for just 3 months, yet she knew every detail of her regular customers' lives, especially Ophelia Beaumont, the woman who occupied table 22 every Tuesday. Always alone, always radiating an air of untouchable power, always treating the staff as if they were part of the furniture. "Perhaps it's a coincidence," Sky offered, an almost imperceptible edge of irony in her tone. "Though my father always said he inherited this watch from his old boss, a very generous lady." Ophelia's grip on her napkin tightened, threatening to tear the expensive linen. Her hand trembled almost imperceptibly as she struggled to process Sky's words. The second watch, the one she'd given to the young gardener in 1998, should have vanished forever along with him. Sky observed every flicker of emotion on the billionaire's face, every bead of sweat that began to form on Ophelia's impeccably made-up forehead, every desperate attempt to maintain her composure in the face of a revelation that threatened to unravel decades of carefully constructed reputation. "Does your father still have the watch?" Ophelia asked, attempting to sound casual, but failing spectacularly. "He did," Sky corrected, and for the first time, her professional smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "He died 3 years ago. Lung disease." He couldn't afford the cutting-edge treatment. The weight of those words hung in the air, a silent condemnation. Ophelia knew exactly who Sky's father was. She knew what she had done to him. She knew why he had never reported her. She knew why he had disappeared from the city, carrying only that watch as the sole damning piece of evidence of a long-buried injustice. Sky straightened up, adjusting her serving tray with the practiced elegance of someone fully in control. "Can I get you anything else, ma'am? Perhaps a photo of my father?" He kept several from his time working for important people. Ophelia's eyes widened. This was no coincidence. It was a silent declaration of war, delivered with the chilling precision of someone who had meticulously planned every word, every gesture, every moment. "That won't be necessary," Ophelia replied, her voice now a strained whisper. Sky nodded, her unsettling calm making the very air seem thicker. "Of course, ma'am. I'll be here if you change your mind." After all, some stories simply demand to be told, don't they? As she walked away from the table, Sky felt Ophelia's desperate gaze burning into her back. The plan, 2 years in the making, was finally in motion. Best of all, Ophelia still had no idea how deep the hole she had dug for herself truly was. Ophelia finished her meal in a haze of paranoia, but Sky could feel the billionaire's eyes tracking her every move across the opulent room. It was precisely the reaction she had anticipated, that toxic blend of arrogance and fear that had destroyed so many lives over the years. 2 hours later, as her shift ended, Sky found Ophelia waiting outside the Zenith, leaning against a sleek, black Rolls-Royce that cost more than most people earned in a decade. "We need to talk," Ophelia stated, attempting to project authority. But Skye detected the tremor of nervousness beneath the facade. "Certainly, Miss Beaumont, my shift just ended." Skye walked directly up to the woman who had haunted her nightmares since childhood. Maintaining that unnerving calm that made Ophelia feel as if she was losing control of a situation she believed she should utterly dominate. "Your father? What was his name again?" "Robert Harding," Skye replied simply. "He worked as a gardener at your estate in Surrey, 1998. The name hit Ophelia like a physical blow. Robert Harding, the 21-year-old black man she had hired when he was desperate for work, recently divorced, and trying to support his young daughter. The very same Robert who had inadvertently witnessed her clandestine meetings with international investors in the garden pavilion, where illegal land deals were brokered and environmental regulations casually bypassed. "I don't remember any Robert," Ophelia lied, but her voice betrayed the vivid memory she desperately tried to suppress. Skye offered a faint smile. Not the professional one she wore at the bar, but something far more dangerous. "It's funny how memory works, isn't it? My father remembered every detail. Especially the night you offered him that watch." The night in question had been in April 1998. Robert had been tending the rose bushes near the pavilion when he overheard Ophelia vehemently discussing with her associates how to silence local activists and forge permits for a protected nature reserve. He had hidden amongst the foliage, listening to details about payoffs to council members and falsified ecological surveys that allowed illegal construction. When Ophelia discovered him there, standing with pruning shears in his hands, her eyes had filled with that chilling fury he would never forget. "How much did you hear?" she had demanded, advancing towards him. "Nothing, ma'am. I was just working." But they both knew that was a lie. "Your father was a very discreet man," Ophelia said, now choosing her words with extreme care. "He always respected his employer's privacy." "Discreet?" Skye laughed softly, a brittle sound. "That's an interesting way to describe someone who was threatened with disappearance if he ever spoke about what he saw." The memory flooded back to Ophelia with full force. She had given Robert the watch that night, not as a gift, but as a chilling reminder of the silent agreement between them. "This watch is worth more than you'll earn in 20 years, she had said. "But if you open your mouth about what you've heard here, I guarantee you and your little girl will vanish without a trace." Robert had taken the watch with trembling hands, knowing he was accepting not just a piece of jewelry, but a sentence of perpetual silence. "He never said a word," Skye continued. "He moved to a small town in Cumbria, raised me on his own, working 2 different jobs. He always said the truth would come out someday." Ophelia tried to regain control of the situation. "Look, girl, I don't know what kind of fantasy your father created, but I can offer you something. A better job, perhaps. £75,000 for you to forget these crazy stories." The bribe was exactly what Skye had hoped for. Ophelia still believed that everyone had a price, that problems could be solved with money. £75,000. Skye pretended to consider the proposal. "You know, it's funny. My father died owing £350,000 in medical bills. Insurance didn't cover the experimental treatment that could have saved his life." The sarcasm in Skye's voice was sharp as glass. £75,000. "It's almost insulting, don't you think?" Ophelia felt a cold sweat trickle down her back. This waitress was not a desperate victim who could be easily bought off. There was something meticulously calculated in her demeanor, as if every word was part of a grander design. £150,000, Ophelia then offered, her voice betraying more desperation. "Final." Skye shook her head slowly. "You still don't understand, do you? This was never about money." "Then what do you want?" "Justice." Skye replied simply, "My father spent 27 years living in fear, moving whenever he thought you'd found us, working himself to death because he could never use references from his job at your estate, dying in silence because he was convinced that if he spoke, I would pay the price." The truth was that Robert had tried to tell his story several times over the years. First to a local journalist who mysteriously dropped the story at the last minute. Then to an environmental lawyer whose office was ransacked the following week and all his files stolen. With each failed attempt, Robert understood better the extent of Ophelia's power. "He died believing you were untouchable," Skye said. "But things have changed a lot in the last few years, haven't they?" Ophelia tried one last shot at intimidation. "Watch your words, girl. I have solicitors who can destroy your life with a single phone call. I'm sure you do." Skye replied calmly. "But I have something your solicitors will never be able to buy or intimidate." "And what would that be?" Skye smiled again. And this time Ophelia felt a genuine chill of fear. "Patience," Skye said, "and a plan that took 2 years to execute." As she walked back to her flat, leaving Ophelia standing alone on the pavement, Skye felt the weight of the promise she had made at her father's grave. Robert Harding had died in silence, but Ophelia Beaumont would learn that his daughter had inherited not only his watch, but also his memory for injustice. Each new threat, each pathetic attempt at bribery, only fueled something inside Skye that her oppressors couldn't see. A determination forged by years of silent suffering and tempered by the absolute conviction that the time had come for the truth to come to light. What Ophelia didn't know was that every word of that conversation had been recorded by the discreet device in Skye's pocket, and that this was only the first move in a game the billionaire didn't even realize she had already lost. Over the next 2 weeks, Ophelia tried everything to make Skye give up. First came the psychological pressure. Anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, strange cars parked outside the small flat Skye shared with 2 university friends. Then came the professional pressure. A casual conversation between Ophelia and the Zenith owner about problem employees, who could damage the establishment's reputation. But Skye had learned from Robert Harding that patience was a more powerful weapon than any direct confrontation. Each new attempt at intimidation only confirmed what she already knew. Ophelia was desperate. "You have no idea what you're getting yourself into," said a voice behind Skye as she waited for the bus home on a rainy Thursday afternoon. Skye turned and found a white woman in her late 40s dressed in an expensive but not ostentatious suit, her eyes sharp with intelligence. "You must be Ophelia Beaumont. You finally decided to show up in person." "I'm Vivian Price, Ophelia's barrister, and I can assure you that you don't want this going to court." Skye smiled, that calm smile that was becoming her trademark. "Court? Who said anything about courts? I just mentioned that my father had an interesting watch." Vivian studied Skye with renewed attention. There was something about the young woman's composure that didn't fit the profile of the desperate victim she had expected to find. "My client is willing to make a final offer, £350,000. You sign a confidentiality agreement and everyone goes on with their lives." "Interesting," Skye replied, pretending to consider the offer. "But I have a counter-proposal." Vivian raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Because this was never about money, Miss Price. It's about something your client lost a long time ago and will never be able to buy back." "And what would that be?" Peaceful sleep. The bus arrived, and Skye boarded, leaving Vivian standing in the rain with a confused look on her face. This was not the behavior of someone who could be easily intimidated or bought. What neither Vivian nor Ophelia knew was that Skye was not acting alone. 3 months before getting the job at the Zenith, she had sought out the only person who could help her navigate the complex legal world surrounding women like Ophelia. Brenda Davies was a senior prosecutor at the Crown Prosecution Service, specializing in environmental and financial crimes. More importantly, she had met Robert Harding. Brenda is a black woman. "Your father came to my office in 2020. Brenda explained during her first meeting with Skye. "He had documents, dates, names, everything we needed to open an investigation into Beaumont Tech." "And why didn't you do anything?" "Because 72 hours later, our key witness, a former employee willing to corroborate your father's story, died in a boating accident. And 2 other contacts disappeared from the country without a trace." Skye felt the familiar mix of anger and determination she had learned to channel. "But things are different now." "They've changed a lot," Brenda agreed. The Pandora Papers scandal, new environmental protection acts, public pressure on corporate corruption. In 2020, Ophelia Beaumont was untouchable. Today, she's a target. It was Brenda who instructed Sky on how to document every interaction with Ophelia. Every meeting, every attempt at bribery, every implied threat was being carefully recorded and cataloged. "She's behaving exactly as we expected," Brenda said as she analyzed the recordings of the rooftop bar conversation. "Arrogant, desperate, and committing new crimes with every attempt to cover up the old ones." "How much time do we need?" 2 more weeks. There's a major regulatory audit of her companies starting next month. If we can present solid evidence of extortion and intimidation before then, it'll be the final push they need to open a full criminal investigation. Sky nodded, but her mind was already several steps ahead. Official justice was important, but she had much more personal plans for Ophelia Beaumont. 2 days later, Sky received an unexpected call at work. "Sky Harding, this is Samantha Beaumont." The last name made Sky freeze. "Ophelia's niece. Honey, I'd very much like to talk to you." Samantha Beaumont was everything her aunt was not: ethical, compassionate, and genuinely committed to social justice. At 38, she had distanced herself from the family business when she discovered the true source of the Beaumont fortune. Samantha is a white woman. "My aunt doesn't know I'm calling," Samantha explained during their meeting at a discreet London cafe. "But I've known about Robert Harding for years." "How?" "Because I hired private investigators when I first began to suspect that our fortune was built on something rotten. They found evidence of at least 8 families who were silenced or intimidated over the years." Samantha slid a folder across the table. "These are copies of documents I got from my aunt's personal safe: fraudulent contracts, records of payments to influence public officials, correspondence about how to deal with problematic witnesses." Sky opened the folder and felt her heart race. There it was. Decades of systematic corruption documented in minute detail. "Why are you giving this to me?" "Because justice delayed isn't justice denied. And because I want my children to grow up knowing that when it came time to choose between family and doing the right thing, I chose to do the right thing." That night, Sky called Brenda with a single sentence: "We just won the game." But even as she organized the evidence that would destroy Ophelia Beaumont, Sky knew that true revenge was yet to come, because some crimes cannot be paid for with prison or bankruptcy. Some crimes must be paid for with a complete destruction of everything the criminal believes to be their identity. And Sky had spent the last 2 years planning exactly that. While Ophelia slept in her mansion, convinced she was dealing with yet another desperate young woman who could be bought or intimidated, Sky was finalizing preparations for something that would make the billionaire question every decision she had made in the last 30 years. Official justice would be just the appetizer. The main course would be much more personal. The following Tuesday would be a night like any other at London's prestigious Green Futures Gala. 300 guests, each ticket costing £7,500, live broadcast on the city's major social media networks and streamed globally. Ophelia Beaumont had bought an entire table, as she did every year, to showcase her philanthropy in front of the cameras. It was the kind of event that fed her ego: photographs with environmental ministers, handshakes with other philanthropists, speeches about corporate social responsibility from the woman who had spent 3 decades destroying ecosystems to build her fortune. Sky arrived at the Grand Hotel as an outsourced employee of the audiovisual company, wearing a discreet uniform, microphone in hand, completely invisible to the guests who didn't even glance at the faces of the people operating the equipment. "Testing, Mr. Beaumont," Sky murmured, approaching the main stage where the billionaire was posing for photos with the event's patron. Ophelia recognized her immediately, and her face paled, almost imperceptibly, but Sky saw it. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Working," Sky replied calmly, her voice carrying clearly into the stage microphones. "Just like my father did when you threatened to erase him." The hushed chatter around the stage died down. The patron and other guests looked confused at the obvious tension between the two women. "Security," Ophelia hissed, her smile now a brittle mask, but Skye raised a hand peacefully. "There's no need for that, Miss Beaumont. I just came to give you something that truly belongs to you." Skye placed a sealed, thick envelope on the podium, right in front of the cameras that were still broadcasting live. The envelope contained copies of all the documents Samantha had provided, plus recordings of every attempt at bribery and intimidation over the past few weeks, meticulously compiled. "You always said that every person has their price," Skye said, her voice clear and resonant for the microphones. "But you forgot to ask what the price of truth is." Ophelia tore open the envelope with trembling hands. As she read, her expression shifted from confusion to absolute horror. There were 30 years of crimes documented in minute detail, every bribe, every environmental violation, every family destroyed. Where did you get this?" Ophelia whispered, her eyes wide with terror. "Your own niece," Skye replied simply. "Samantha has a conscience you never developed." The entire hall was silent now. The cameras focused alternately on Ophelia, who appeared to be suffering a public breakdown, and Skye, who maintained the unsettling calm she had perfected over the years. Brenda Davies entered the hall at that exact moment, accompanied by 4 National Crime Agency officers. It was no coincidence. Skye had timed every detail to ensure maximum public impact. "Ophelia Beaumont," Brenda announced loudly enough for everyone to hear, "you are under arrest for corporate fraud, bribery of public officials, environmental violations, and witness intimidation." The silence was broken by the sharp click of handcuffs and the relentless flash of cameras. Ophelia looked around desperately, searching for an exit, an ally, anything that could save her from this public humiliation. "This is a mistake," she screamed as she was led away. "I have barristers, I have connections." Skye walked over to where Ophelia was being handcuffed. "Do you know the difference between us, Miss Beaumont? You always believed that power is taking what you want from people weaker than you. I've learned that true power is using the system against those who think they're above it." Ophelia tried one last desperate gambit. "You think this will bring your father back? You think this changes anything?" Skye smiled, not with anger, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who had finally seen justice done. "No, it won't bring my father back, but it will ensure that other families don't go through what mine did, and sometimes that's enough." As Ophelia was led away by the officers, Skye turned to the cameras still broadcasting live. "My name is Skye Harding. My father's name was Robert Harding. For 27 years, he lived in fear of a woman who believed she was above the law. Today, we prove that no one is." The gala host, trying to regain control of the chaotic situation, whispered something about cutting the feed, but it was too late. The story was already spreading across social media, videos being shared thousands of times per minute. Samantha Beaumont approached Skye amid the chaos. "Thank you," she said simply, "for doing what I never had the courage to do." "Thank you for giving me the tools to do this right," Skye replied. As the gala guests whispered and speculated, trying to distance themselves from Beaumont before her reputation tarnished theirs, Skye discreetly removed the small recorder from her pocket and handed it to Brenda. "Today's conversation," she explained. "She tried to bribe me again just before you arrived." Brenda shook her head, impressed. "You documented everything. My father taught me that the truth always finds a way to come out. I just had to give it a little help." In the minutes that followed, as the news spread, 3 other victims of Beaumont Tech came out of the shadows, emboldened by Skye's courage. Families that had been silenced for decades finally had a voice. Ophelia Beaumont's empire began to crumble in real time. Stocks plummeted, business partners canceled contracts, and federal investigations opened in multiple countries. Skye left the hotel that night knowing that her father could finally rest in peace. The promise whispered at his grave 3 years earlier had been fulfilled. But as she walked through the streets of London, she passed a newsstand where the first copies of the special edition were already on sale. The headline read, "Tech Titan Arrested in Live Gala Scandal. Niece Exposes Own Aunt." Skye stopped and bought a copy, not out of vanity, but because she wanted to make sure that Robert Harding's story was finally being told the way it deserved to be. On the front page, her photo was next to her father's. 2 generations united in the pursuit of justice. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about proving that systems built to protect the powerful could be used to protect the vulnerable, as long as someone had enough patience and intelligence to work within them. It was about turning pain into purpose and silence into revolution. 6 months after Ophelia Beaumont's arrest, Skye Harding was sitting in an office overlooking Regent's Park, not as a visitor, but as the owner. The Robert Harding Foundation, created with some of the money recovered from Beaumont Tech's fraudulent schemes, had already helped 55 families who had suffered corporate intimidation. Ophelia Beaumont, meanwhile, awaited trial in a high-security prison, abandoned by her former elite friends, who fled her like rats from a sinking ship. Her barristers had managed to reduce her bail to just $75 million, an impossible sum for someone whose assets had been frozen by the courts. Ironic, isn't it? Brenda Davies commented during a meeting at the foundation. She spent her whole life buying people, and when she needed real friends, she discovered that money can't buy genuine loyalty. Samantha Beaumont had taken control of the family businesses, implementing strict ethical policies and a reparations program for her aunt's victims. Some fortunes need to be rebuilt from scratch, she explained at a press conference that Skye watched on television in her office. The case had become a legal landmark. Prosecutors in 6 different countries opened similar investigations using the model created by Brenda and Skye to combat corporate intimidation. The Harding Doctrine, as the press dubbed it, set precedents for protecting whistleblowers who reported white-collar crimes. Skye never worked as a waitress again, but she kept a photo of the Zenith staff on her desk. Some of her former colleagues now worked at the foundation. Others had gotten better jobs with letters of recommendation that Skye wrote personally. The most touching story came 4 months after Ophelia's arrest. A 62-year-old black man named Frank Miller approached the foundation with a case almost identical to Robert Harding's: intimidation, forced silence, decades of fear. But this time, there was someone willing to listen and take action. "My father died believing he was alone in this fight," Skye said during the first hearing in the Miller case. "Today, no family has to face this battle alone." Ophelia tried one last desperate gambit. She offered to turn in other corrupt business figures in exchange for a reduced sentence, but she found that even her dirty secrets had lost their value. The elite she had protected for decades now treated her like a radioactive outcast. On sentencing day, Skye was in court. 30 years in prison. Ophelia would walk out of jail, a 95-year-old woman, if she walked out at all. When the 2 women's eyes met for the last time, Skye felt no anger or satisfaction, just the quiet peace of someone who had turned trauma into purpose. "She wanted to know if I felt vindicated," Skye told Samantha after the hearing. "I said revenge was too small a word to describe how I felt. It was justice. It was closure. It was proof that systems can work when the right people decide to make them work." The foundation grew exponentially. Volunteer barristers, retired investigators, idealistic journalists, everyone wanted to be part of something that was truly changing lives. Skye had discovered that her true calling was not waiting tables but serving justice. A year after Ophelia's arrest, Skye was invited to speak at the graduation ceremony of the law school where her father had dreamed of studying before life's demands interrupted his plans. Robert Harding never had the chance to fight for justice in the courts. Skye told the graduates, "But he taught me that justice is not the privilege of those with degrees, it is the responsibility of those with courage." Her father's watch now hung in the foundation's main hall, accompanied by a simple plaque, "Robert Harding, 1974-2022. He taught us that enforced silence is not the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a fight for those who have enough love to carry on." Ophelia had tried to use power and money to write the story the way she wanted. But she discovered that there are forces more powerful than wealth, memory, justice, and the relentless determination of a daughter who refused to let her father's legacy die in silence. Sky Harding proved that the best revenge isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building something so powerful and positive that the evil they tried to do becomes irrelevant in the face of the good you create. My father always said that the truth has legs, Sky reflected, looking out the window of her office. Sometimes it just needs someone willing to teach it how to run.